Welcome to our World of Fiery videos, covering topics of everyday importance to print providers. Today we will cover what are press standards.
Hello everyone, and thank you for joining us today. Before we get a little further into our discussion about press standards and also certification programs that are available for representing that you have matched a press standard with your digital equipment, I want to start with some basic definitions as I typically do. Let's start by talking about what a press standard is. A press standard serves to tell the print buyer what to expect. That is maybe the most important thing about the press standard, all the business that you can drive from matching a standard aside, and we're going to talk about that. But the single most important thing you can say about a press standard is that it tells your buyer what to expect, what the print will look like. So it's very important for that reason. It also gives the buyer a reference to compare your work to, because if they've been buying color that you say is matching some standard like ISO V2, the Fogra standard, and then one day the color looks different, they're going to probably want to see you measure some strip and show some calculations to show that you're still matching the color, which you may not be. There's also a big value in press standards for you as a print producer, because the standard, or the press reference as we sometimes call it, gives you something to defend yourself with. It's a way to say, I am matching color, or this certain reference for color, and I know I am, and you can demonstrate that to your customers. The thing that complicates this whole business is the fact that most print buyers, and you can attest to this probably, and maybe even some print providers, don't really know how to measure or monitor their conformance with the standard. So they may say, yes, I print to the swap reference or Grackle or ISO or what have you, but particularly on the print buyer end, they don't have any way to find out if that's really true. You can add a lot of value as a print provider if you're not already doing this, and I know many of you are, by picking a standard, working to match a standard on your different sheets and different output devices, and then monitoring that conformance and being able to demonstrate it and share that story with your customers about how precise and how consistent your color is. So the standards, or the references in the US anyway, give us this funny joke we can make about the Rice Krispies guys, which is Snap, Grackle, and Swap. These are three standards or references in the US. Snap is a newsprint standard. Grackle is the standard for printing on a commercial sheet fed press on a number 1 sheet. And Swap is a standard for printing on publication press, on a web-fed coated press, which has typically been used for publication work in this country. So not everyone knows the joke, but you'll hear people joke about the standards, and sooner or later somebody will show you the Rice Krispies Trio and Snap, Grackle, Swap. So we thought we'd share that with you here. So to talk about the definition of a certification program for a printing process or proofing system or whatever it might be, certification programs, again, are offered by a couple of industry associations, namely IDEAlliance in the US and Fogra pretty much for the rest of the world. A certification program defines the requirements for the system, and we call it the normative requirements, which is just a technical way of saying the print system has to do these things in order to pass, in order to get a certification. That's what normative means. Some examples for you today are Swap and Grackle, but be careful, there's only Swap and Grackle certification programs for proofing systems. You cannot buy a press that is certified to match Swap or Grackle. There's no such thing. So if you're hearing people say that, or your competitors are telling people that, this is an excellent opportunity for you to demonstrate your leadership in the area of printing and in your marketplace by understanding the reality here and sharing that with your customers, that there is no one who is Swap or Grackle certified unless they're making, inkjet proofs at a rate of, 1 per 10 minutes kind of thing. Another certification is Snap. That's the newsprint certification I've referenced a couple times, and I'm not going to go into too much more detail there. IDEAlliance Digital Press Certification, which we'll look at in some depth to understand what a certification is. This is a certification for a print system. So this is a digital print system, including a digital front end and a digital press. Okay, this program is not available for your conventional presses. It is specific to digital. Fogra Cert VPS, that is this Fogra version of certification for digital print systems. Fogra does have some other programs I haven't listed on the slides, and they can in fact come in and certify a shop if you're willing to have them come in and measure all your presses and processes and that sort of thing. So the value of a certification program to your print buyers is that this gives them some assurance that you can match a standard, or a reference at least. Not all of these color references I've described are technically standards that have been adopted by the ISO. But it's a way of you telling your customer when they see that seal on your press or on your door that you match a reference consistently and you intend to do that every time with their work. It also gives the buyer some sense or some guarantee that you're quality minded. Because if you're going to get to one of these certifications and measure yourself and prove that you're there, chances are you're going to measure and prove that you're there every couple of days. So it gives your buyer a great deal of confidence, or can give them confidence, that your color is going to be not just good, but also very consistent. Next up here, I have a link for you to see the Fogra certifications. Same idea, large number of systems certified, which include both a combination of DFE and the digital press, particular substrate. In the case of the Fogra certifications, these are matching to a different reference, not to the Grackle reference used in the US, but rather to the Fogra 39L reference, which is used certainly all over Europe and in much of the rest of the world as the standard, if you will. And that one is, in fact, a standard. So let's talk about the digital press certification program from IDEAlliance, just to show you what goes into making or getting to a certified system. The first thing we're going to do, or that the IDEAlliance folks do when we send them one of these certifications, is they visually evaluate the sheets. Next comes a colorimetric evaluation using this unit called delta E, that I know some of you on this webinar today are super familiar with. Some of you maybe less so, so we'll give you a little definition of that in a minute. There's a test for uniformity, that is consistency within a press run. Also for uniformity over the short term and long term, because remember, your customer wants to be assured that the print you sell them today that looks great will also look great if you have to print another set tomorrow, or in a month, or in a year. So all these things are important. There's tests for minimum font size to test the resolving power of the press. There's a tint uniformity test, which I'll give you some detail on, and which I'll tell you is a very, very hard test to pass on a digital press. It's in fact not that easy to pass even on one of your conventional presses. When you see what this is, I think you'll probably agree with me. Finally, there's a test of density loss during abrasion, again to direct mail applications, making sure that the toner adheres to the work. Some of you that may already be doing direct mail work or have done it historically probably remember the days of printing all those postcards and then having to take them over to another press so you could run them through a coater and get an aqueous coating on them and not have the toner disappear before the recipient of the mail piece gets it. Finally, there's a measurement of gloss, which is informative. That is to say, it's not normative. They want to know how glossy these different presses are, and you can look at that information. And there's a check of the registration of the press, of course. The first thing that happens after this is a colorimetric evaluation of the form. And this has always been sort of one of the central points of a certification program. So yeah, we're going to test all this other stuff, and I'm going to talk to you about that in a moment. But the first thing is, does the digital print system match the reference that you're trying to print to, that you want to tell your customer you print to, and that you want your customer to be confident you are matching when you print? The way we determine this is colorimetrically. Colorimetrically simply means I measure all those patches with a spectrophotometer, and I calculate what we call the delta E. Let's talk about this for a minute. Delta E is a standard unit used to measure color difference, okay? And it's designed to work in a certain space. So I've put up an example here for you where we see these two little arrows. Imagine if these arrows each represented one color difference unit. The problem in this 1931 XYZ space, the original device-independent color space, is that the difference of one unit at the top is the difference between a bluer green and a yellower green. And the difference with the other arrow is the difference between green and red. So it wouldn't be very reasonable for us to calculate color difference or something like this delta E unit in this XYZ space because it's not uniform. It has a lot more green representing the sensitivity of our eyes in terms of the number of values that are in that model. So instead we're going to use our LAB model. The LAB color space, you may remember me saying, is perceptually uniform, which means as the numbers change in LAB, so does the human perception equally, or roughly so. So that in this color space, if I show you what 1 delta E is, and 1 delta E is defined as the color difference barely perceivable to the human observer. 1 delta E on the left shows me a small difference in green. 1 delta E on the right shows me a small difference in the red to magenta region. Okay? So this is a good example of what a delta E is. It's a uniform difference unit. 1 always means I can barely see it. Sometimes we want to get down to 1 or 2 or 3. For some other things, sometimes we'll settle for a slightly higher delta E value for our criteria for passing. So if we look at the colorimetric evaluation, and I'm not going to read you all these details, but basically IDEAlliance tells us that for all patches of that target, which is the IT874 1617 patch target, we need to have an average delta E under 2.5 and a 95th percentile under 4 or equal to 4. You'll see here too that all these slides say delta E 00 to the right of them. This is delta E 2000 that is technically used for the IDEAlliance program. It's a much more modern way to calculate delta E. It's far too complex for me to explain on this webinar, but basically it scales the delta E further so that it's even more uniform with human perception than the LAB color space from 1976 was. So this is for the overall match. We have all these different delta E's that we have to match on the spectrophotometer measurements. The next thing we do is we look at uniformity within the press run. So this measures press variation over time. We submit a number of sheets. 5 sequential sheets are measured. And then there's a pseudo-random sequence where they take some other sheets out of all the ones we submitted, and they measure them. Between all those sheets, the delta E must be less than or equal to 2.5 at the midtones and 2.0 at the solids. So this is very difficult, and some people would say, you know, digital presses can't do this, lasers can't do this, it's not consistent enough over time. There's a large amount of certifications you can go look at on the web to see that many digital presses can do this and that we have done it with them, and you can look at the certification for that. Let me make one more comment here before we go on. And it's going to relate to the next topic as well. Many people who are moving to digital, or if you find yourself in a competitive situation with somebody who is purely conventional printer, and they have some magic cost structure where they can somehow keep up with your digital print, even a conventional press, unless it's a very, very new press, is going to have a difficult time maintaining some of these specifications. Specifically, the delta E of 2 over an entire press run. You guys have spectrophotometers. I know that those of you out there with conventional presses could check this if you want. I'd be very impressed if you can keep your whole run within 2 delta E. The next standard, or the next part of the certification that we need to do, is we need to show our tint uniformity. Anybody with a conventional press? Same challenge, right? Remember running those big blocks of spot solids or whatever? Maybe you're making some kind of forms, or you're making some sheets that will be used in some other way. Very hard to keep a conventional press even across the sheet. Also, very, very difficult in the digital space. So for this test, basically, we use the M-score, which is a calculation developed by Fogra. M-score shows me how uniform my sheet is, and basically it's a way of numerically measuring if I have any banding on the sheet or any mottling, which are classic problems with digital printing. The way we do this test is we print a gray sheet. We actually do several of them, but I'm just showing you one. This is a 3-color gray, so it's something like a 40% cyan, 30% magenta, 30% yellow build, a gray balanced 3-color build. We print the sheet, and rather than looking at it, we put it in a spectrophotometer. The scanning spectrophotometer is actually going to measure this sheet in 46 columns and 64 rows on the sheet. So every one of those little spots you see on the sheet now represents a point where my scanning spectrophotometer is going to measure. And out of these 2,900 or so samples, we calculate delta E, color difference, across the rows and down the columns, and we integrate all those values using this formula from Fogra into what's called the M-score. And this is an ISO standard 15311. The M-score, to get an IDEAlliance certification, has to be on the order of 60, which is very, very difficult. And again, unless you have a very new conventional press and you're running it very, very carefully, it's also hard to keep your sheets even, especially across a large form if you have a full sheet press. The next test is density loss during abrasion. This is a Tabor testing machine that basically rubs those color blocks that you see at the top here. And then we measure the density loss. So the density must be at least 50% of the starting value. I know that seems like a big shift, but the machine that they spin this thing on is quite aggressive and is actually designed to test for mailing applications. Any of you that have done direct mail and have gotten some of your Nixies back, I'm sure you've seen that sometimes they look pretty bad after going through the mail. So this test really makes sure that the print will be durable enough for your direct mail applications. The last thing I want to talk about in the realm of this certification, so I've talked to you a little bit about what the details are of how they do the IDEAlliance Digital Press certification. As I told you, we have many systems certified, and I encourage you to go look at the IDEAlliance website or that Fogra website and see all the systems that are certified. But perhaps the most important part of any of these programs for you, besides the way you can use this to your business advantage in terms of competitive selling and telling your print buyers what to expect, etc., is that part of having a certified system, if you already own one of these or if you're looking to a new press and you invest in one, is you're going to go download this application data sheet. The ADS, or application data sheet, must be submitted with the digital press certification form, and basically it gives the cookbook instructions for how we did the certification. Remember, we have to do all this printing. In the case of IDEAlliance, we can do it in one location and send it to them. This is our document that shows exactly what we did. In the case of Fogra certification, Fogra actually sends representatives to meet us at a site, and they do the testing with us. We have the same requirement. Why? Because otherwise you would buy a digital press system that was certified, and you'd get it back in your shop, and you'd put some paper in it, and you'd say, am I matching to Fogra, or ISO rather? Am I matching to Grackle? You probably wouldn't know. And if you're sophisticated enough to know and you found you weren't matching, you might have a lot of questions about how to get there. This application data sheet gives you every bit of detail about how to do that. I will encourage you, if you are still looking to buy a system and you look to one of these certified systems, which I recommend you do, you should download the application data sheet for that system and for the DFE vendor of your choice, since it might be a Fiery driving it, but it might be something other than EFI. Make sure you get the right level of detail in this application data sheet. We have made an extra effort to put in every last detail we can think of so that if you get an EFI or a Fiery data sheet, you can read it and pretty much do this on your own if you have the equipment. So how do we do this on your DFE? The first thing is, as I said a moment ago, you're going to need to make a custom output profile. Factory profiles that came with your DFE are very, very good and give excellent appearance of your prints probably, but the chances are that they get you to colorimetrically, that is by the delta E, match one of these references the way the certified systems do, are not very good. Your press, as we talked about 2 sessions ago, is in a different environment than the one where the factory profile was made. That means it has different humidity, different temperature operating conditions. It also is somewhere else, probably in its maintenance cycle, than the press on which the factory profile was made. So if you want to match a reference and constantly keep yourself with a reference, you're going to need to make an output profile. We're going to use output profiling software. Again, we showed you the Color Profiler Suite product that we offer with the Fiery a couple of sessions ago. And you're going to follow all the details in the application data sheet for the certified system. And that will tell you, in terms of Color Profiler Suite, at least for the EFI certifications, exactly how the settings were configured in the software, all the way through all the expert settings, how many patches to measure, and all that sort of thing. Once we have an output profile, the next thing we need to do, of course, we load that up on our DFE, and then we need to pick a source profile. The magic of a digital print system compared to a conventional press is that it has color management. Not everyone understands this, but very, very few conventional presses are sitting at the back end of a fully color managed workflow where you're color managing the data that you're plating. Now, I know there's a few of you on the webinar today that may be doing this, and you're probably waving your hands at me right now, but that's very, very uncommon. That's why G7 calibration of your conventional press is so important and valuable. When we come over to the digital side, we have a system in front of us that we would be fools not to use. If we simply turn on color management, make a custom output profile, pick the right source or input profile, which represents the standard or the reference we want to match, we're going to match that reference, assuming that our press and the substrate we've chosen to print on has enough gamut to match that reference, right? Enough color range. So if I'm trying to pass the IDEAlliance certification, basically I make a custom output profile, and then I go into the DFE settings, and again, I'm showing you Command Workstation from the Fiery since that's our easy access DFE around here, and I pick the Grackle source profile. Grackle 2006 coded, and I'm going to also tell it to use full output GCR, which gives me all the benefits of the black generation that we've set up inside that profile. Again, you can read this from the application datasheet for the press. You don't have to worry about those details. Once I've set this up, I'm going to make a print. Tough question. Did you match the reference? Can you look at it and tell me you matched the reference? No. Can you sell it to your customer and tell them it's the reference? Probably. You've been selling color for a really long time. But if you want to know and be able to demonstrate to your customer that you know and that you are quality minded and will be going forward about your color, then you're going to need a color verification tool. Good news, your profiling package came with it. So Color Profiler Suite I'm showing here comes with Verify. This is a very sophisticated professional level tool. There's also several very easy novice level things. You can just click different places in the software and tell it to verify a job, and it'll print a small set of patches to measure and report. But this is a full report from the Verify application showing my match to a standard. If you look down here, I'm actually comparing myself to the validation print standard from Fogra, the ISO V2 standard. And you can see that I'm passing at the right. Now I know. Okay? The even better practice I could do than verifying my work like I've done here is to verify it over time and to track and trend this over time. So look at what the delta E's are today. Try it again tomorrow and next week and the following week and so on. Watch what happens to your delta E's. They're going to drift. Your device has inherent drift in it based on temperature and humidity and service. So there will come a time, probably the next shift or the next day, when I'll need to minimally calibrate to get back to this reference. And there will also come a time, and it might be a week or a month or more out, depending on my environment, where I have to make a new output profile in order to get back to that reference. So I know all this sounds like a lot of work. I wanted to give you some next steps you could think about if you want to get started in working in the area of press references or press standards and these certifications. First thing is, pick the reference you want. Might be Snap, Grackle, Swap, ISO. A number of these could be the thing that you say, you know, we're going to standardize our shop on this, and we're going to print to this on every sheet, on every press that we possibly can. Another idea for a next step, if you don't already have a DFE or if you're in the market for a new one, I would strongly consider getting one that is a certified system. Again, you can look these up on the website. Next step, have color management tools. If you already have a press and you don't have color management tools, this is the single most important investment you could make to getting your color into a repeatable, standardized deliverable that you can advertise to your customers and get their, number one, get more of their business and also get more business. If you already have a DFE, take a look. There's a good chance if you got a professional level production system, it probably came with a color profiling system you may not even be using. So you might want to look in the bottom drawer or ask your manufacturer and see if maybe you already have the tools to make the profile and do the verification. And then finally, to get a certified system, you can follow the ADS instructions from the application data sheet to get your output profile made and verify that you're matching.
Thank you for watching. For additional resources and e-learning classes on this topic, visit our website. To see all recorded sessions and register for upcoming World of Fiery webinars, please visit efi.com/WOF webinars.